Hey everybody, it's the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and you are watching the weekly Wringer here on clanofthegreywolf.com. We've got another epic question from last week to unravel, which I will do so in as, I guess, quick a way as I possibly can. Maybe not as quick a way as I possibly can, but trying to do it a little quicker than last week, which was a record 37 minutes in length. So trying to keep an eye on the clock a little bit better and maybe keep things a little bit shorter. Although I have to say, none of you seemed to mind too much, as we have one of the, again, a very long and drawn-out comments session this time. So you guys don't seem to mind the longer videos, therefore maybe I should not care about them nearly as much. In any case, we have a lot to do today, so I've got to wrap up the question from last week, which really spoke to the cultural differences in video game creation these days, and really speaks to a lot of the questions of what makes a game popular / what makes a game good. So we're going to tie that up a little bit. I'm going to talk about a few of the contributions because there were so many. It's almost impossible to cover them all, and so many ideas that it's impossible to really flesh them out. This is one of those things I think we could have started early on a weekend day where we're all sitting around, you know, just having a few drinks and, you know, enjoying some hors d'oeuvres, and gone all the way past, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and been completely, you know, still on the topic and still trying to cover all the elements of it. It's a big, big topic, guys. I know that. That's one of the reasons why I give it, you know, to you guys in that fashion of very open-ended. I want to see what's going to come from it. But anyway, it's going to take a while to wrap that up, and so I'm going to do so. Then I'm going to talk about my own thoughts, as I always do, to try to wrap up my answer to the question. And then I want to ask you guys a question about the future of social networking, which I think should be a lot of fun. Okay, so first things first, before I get into any of the things I just told you about, I am recording this a day late. We got kind of thrown off by July 4th, so it won't happen again next week, but this week things are getting recorded a day late, so everything's going to be a little bit of a day late, just like it was during the holiday week. So, you know, shortened week, but again, that hasn't seemed to be a problem. And before I get back into the topic at hand, I wanted to say we had just a tremendous outpouring of new folks. Both this week and last week, we've had just a lot of new people, and I love that. That's what keeps this interesting and exciting. I love getting new folks. I love getting new ideas. It's very glad. It makes all of us very glad to see that there are new people coming and commenting and posting, and we had several people say, hey, you know, I've been watching, but I haven't posted before. Well, I'm glad that you found what you were looking for as a threshold to jump in to go ahead and post. So there's always that. All right, guys, so here are the new people. I was going to say a quick mention to them. Kappa Master, Rustin, Juris Consult, which takes the legalistic trophy home for the name today. Clocktown 64. Now this one I'm going to have a hard time with because I could say this literally 100 different ways, but I think it's Siege or Siga. An Antichrist, which gets the, you know, I guess the evil new name of the week award, which is an award I just made up, and also Lucky. Welcome to the community, all one and all. Lucky, though, I have to say a special thing too. I mean, wow, it's rare to find somebody that appreciates Seventh Guest and its tremendous contribution to video gaming. As much as I do, but it seems like you have the same appreciation. And by the way, I absolutely am looking forward to whatever iteration finally comes, whether it's from anybody that was ever connected with Trilobite or whether it comes from the fan community. A third iteration of the Seventh Guest is absolutely 100% necessary, and I can't wait to have it. All right, so now let's wrap up that question from last week, guys. Here is what I asked. I asked you all, on a very patriotic weekend here in the United States, I asked you why, or what was it about the Japanese model, let's say, that kind of made it lose favor in lieu of the tremendous popularity of the American model. I didn't define what those models were, and honestly that didn't turn out to be much of a problem, but I think there were some really insightful comments. So many so that I couldn't possibly list them all. So what I wanted to do was what I did was I listed a few people, very few people, that put in comments that happened for the first time and then maybe got expanded by other folks later on. So many of you talked about some of these elements in one way or another and probably expanded on them in ways that help to kind of make the point in a better way. First of all, I'd say Estolia, talking about the idea that the consoles and the evolution of the consoles has a lot to do with it. I know you were just exaggerating, but saying Bill Gates threw money at it and that's how it happened. I know you're just joking, but at the same time, there's merit to that point, right? The idea that Microsoft comes in, and someone else mentioned very much later on, the idea that the Xbox is really unabashedly, the original Xbox is unabashedly a small PC that happens to run a very simplistic Linux-like operating system and delivers into software that is self-sustaining and doesn't need much support of anything running kind of behind it. That's not anything really that new in terms of how, if you look at the function of every system that came before it, besides the fact that they hid the fact that they were computers really, really well. They didn't resemble in any kind of clear and close way our PCs. The Xbox absolutely 100% did. It just looked like a PC. It felt like a PC. God knows it was heavy as a PC. So I think there is something to do with the fact that Nintendo and Sony, although Sony is very much behind the growth of the revenue, of the American model in business terms over the last 15 years, as much as anyone is, I would make that argument. But it is a Japanese company, it's worth pointing out. So you have Nintendo, you have the lineage of Sega, and by the way, the lineage of Sega is Peter Moore, who goes to work and launches the Xbox. So I mean, I don't know, guys. He was the head of the Dreamcast division too. So anyway, the point is, you have Nintendo, you have Sony, both Japanese companies. You have Microsoft, which is obviously an American company and a staple of, let's say, high-tech things all over the world. Really, no matter what country you go to, people know who Microsoft is, they know what they make, and they kind of are familiar with the fact that most computers run on some kind of Microsoft operating system, or with some kind of Microsoft software at the very least. So I think there's something to that. I think the fact that that the Xbox steps onto the scene kind of brazenly, in very American fashion, right? Kind of brazenly, with reckless abandon and wanton disregard for the tradition of what it took to make a good game system. That probably initially hurt them a lot, but in the 360 they really capitalized on that. They changed a lot of things. They made a lot of improvements with the 360 model. And I think that has a lot to do with the success of the 360, which has been a very successful console, I think, no matter how you look at it, even with all of the problems that have plagued it. And the problems are many. So I think the consoles have something to do with it. It's not a stretch to say that the 360 is more of an American console than the PlayStation 3 is a Japanese console. The PlayStation 3 tries to sit somewhere in the middle. And I think it does probably both equally. People in Japan appreciate it for what it is. I think people in the West, not even just American, but people in the West appreciate the PS3 for what it is. It does a good job of sitting in the middle. The Xbox doesn't. The Xbox is more of a Western machine that tries to venture out and appeal to more Eastern audiences, hence its popularity and its difficulty to penetrate those markets. But I think it's an interesting point in this question about the destruction of the Japanese model of video games, that the Xbox has become synonymous with gaming, number one, because no one says PlayStation anymore. Everyone says Xbox. We talked about that a couple of ringers ago. When you're going to go play video games, you're going to play Xbox, right? That's how everyone references it in the media. So it's become synonymous with gaming. And it's a more American console, more American, right? More Western, let's say. So it would make sense that the American model of video gaming, the largest market in the world for video games, would have some kind of sway. And some of you made an argument about just the business element and aspects of it, right? So the idea that it's just that this is the largest gaming market, so therefore it was inevitable that America take over in terms of how it produces games. You know, there's merit to that. There's absolutely merit to it, and I'm not going to dismiss it. But I will say that something in my gut tells me that's not quite right. Mr. Kettleman had a great comment about it, about gaming no longer being a subcultural formation and being now a widespread, almost ubiquitous cultural element. People know something about the Wii, even if they've never played it now. And it's not something that just these people do that are crazy and weird. It's stuff that people do that are very normal and lead very normal lives. Like I'm sure most of you and myself, although it gets kind of crazy at times, lead very normal lives. We're very normal people, right? So I think that in terms of business and in terms of popularity terms, there's a merit to the fact that video games are no longer a niche and appeal to a much wider audience. But I don't know that that necessarily explains, because I mean the Japanese are the kings of cultural games, guys. Cultural, did I just say cultural? They might be the kings of cultural games too, by the way, but that's not the argument I'm trying to make. I apologize. Casual, not cultural. The Japanese are the kings of the casual game. Yes, I know most of the games that are here that are Japanese happen to be things like, JRPGs, and they're things that we're all very happy about, and they're very deep and engrossing games. But just go to Japan, and I can't say that I've ever been, but I know enough people that have been to be able to say, hey, look, there are casual games everywhere in Japan. They're all over the place. It's everywhere you go. Those Japanese games have not held a lot of market over here for one reason or another. They might have inspired other Western developers to make a game that's very similar, has a similar mechanic, which has happened time and again, but those games themselves haven't been able to breach it. And I'll add to that in a little while once I get into my own conversation. So that was another great thing. Kado talked about two things I want to mention. One, that video game, and so many of you talked about this. Video games were conceived, or I'm sorry, not conceived. Video games became popular in America as a toy, as an item for children, as something that was, again, we talk about that niche. It held its niche in children. Right? That was the only way they could sell them. Now, the rest of the world's a little different. I would say most of the West has the same commonality. But lest we forget that in Japan, video games were never marketed towards kids. They were always things that people did, regardless of what age you were. You could enjoy playing Super Mario Brothers. That wasn't... I don't think Super Mario Brothers was ever supposed to be culturally defined, and I don't think it was supposed to ever really be age-defined in any kind of way. So, but Kado's point is that in America, in the West, they were initially kids' items and stigmatized for kids only. And then eventually, Mortal Kombat, Doom, all the folks that really pushed the bar in terms of what's going on. And this happens coincidentally with some of the stuff we've already talked about, the launching of the Xbox, the way the Genesis kind of positioned itself against the Super Nintendo. Moving forward on and on and on. Games in the West had to grow up with their audience, and they have. Japanese games, which were always intended to be a much more cultural formation for Japanese folks, really have not grown up with the American, and I would say maybe more larger Western audience. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still plenty of people out there, and Sonic Rose, a few of you made some comments about this, and I loved it. there is a niche out there of people that really have a litmus test of whether you really like Japanese culture or whether you really don't. You like anime, you don't, right? You like